We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. By the time you hear this, it is Friday. We're recording on Thursday night. We have Eric with us, and I'm glad Eric could show up today because we got so much weird shit going on that it's good to get some insight from Eric, who'll maybe give us some details, some things that we hadn't thought about. Uh, Welcome, Eric. And the big story of today was pretty stupid, pretty ignorant by Donald Trump, but so typical. We had six members of Congress who happen to be veterans do a video telling people in the military that they should not and do not have to follow illegal orders. That's that's just wordage coming from the oath that they sign, their list of rules in the military. That's nothing strange about that. But that got Donnie Trump unhinged. So much so, he said that these members of Congress are committing treason and they should be hung. Well, as you can imagine, that caused quite an uproar. And people say, well, that's just how he talks. Yeah. Well, that's coming from the same guy who had his people going after his vice president to hang him and to kill Nancy Pelosi. So you got to take it a little serious when he spews this bullshit. When you heard that, what was the first thing you were thinking of? I thought stupid, but that's typical of Donald Trump.
Yeah, I thought it was typical of Donald Trump. I mean, if this had been a Democrat or if we had had any other group of Republicans in there, Donald Trump would be out on his ass. Now, they're going to try to excuse it for a little bit. And if he backs off of it or, quits talking about it, they may let it go. If he keeps pushing it, much like the Epstein files, they may say, okay, this is getting to be a bridge too far. You're calling for the death of sitting members of Congress. Now, how long until he turns on one of them? I mean, he's turned on Marjorie Taylor Greene. He calls her Marjorie Trader Greene, like I think a lot of us did before.
Yeah,
And
very
he's
original.
saying, well, very original. But the penalty for treason can be punishable by death. So now that he thinks she's a traitor, does that mean she could be up? And once they start realizing that they're going to be in the crosshairs, again, it's going to turn into a bridge too far. This whole thing with Donald Trump, it's a desperate attempt to look like the tough guy, to be the strong man here, and it's not going to work. But
No,
it's all he's got.
it's going to hurt him. I mean, if you want to put people to death for sedition or treason, there were two guys from the Oath Keepers or the Proud Boys that were convicted in the January 6th thing. At least two or three of them were convicted of seditious conspiracy. So I guess in that mindset, we should have just hung them. We should have just strung them up and hung them. But here's what Donald Trump said, and here's what Carolyn Levitt and Fox News said. And how dare they? They are telling these people, these members of Congress are telling people in the military to ignore lawful orders by Donald Trump. Now you see where the problem is there. They're getting it wrong. That's not what they said. They said illegal orders from Donald Trump. And then Carolyn Levitt said, so here they're suggesting he's made some illegal orders? Yeah, motherfucker, he has. He's bombing boats in the fucking ocean. He's sending troops into cities. Yeah, there's some unlawful orders there, but these people will continue to fight against this and apologize or support what he's doing. And it's so clear, it's so cut and dried. I don't know how they can even argue it, but that just shows how complicit they are.
Oh yeah, they're definitely complicit. And one of the things they're doing with this, she's trying to do to excuse it away. Of course, as we've talked about, when it's all said and done and Donald Trump is gone, effectively what these members of Congress are saying is the same thing you and I have said, and Trucker T and some of the others on the lives have said, is that when Donald Trump is gone, These members of the military need to remember that if they carried out unlawful orders, they could be facing the USCMJ, the U.S. Code of Military Justice. They could be staring at time in Leavenworth. They could be looking at dishonorable discharges, reduction in rank, all sorts of punishments, all for listening to Donald Trump. And they've held that I'm just following orders is not a good enough reason to follow an unlawful order. Now, they're Fox News and Carolyn Levitt are, of course, trying to spin it because they said illegal orders. Illegal and unlawful are synonyms, but they want you to believe that these members of Congress are trying to say, we'll just ignore anything Donald Trump says. And that's not the case. There are certain things the president is not allowed to do, and they shouldn't, like, we shouldn't be talking about the fact that we are well into, what is it, 15 to 20 fishing boats, I think we're up to now, that have been blown
Yeah.
up off the coast of Venezuela in international waters. It never should have gotten to one without Congress saying, wait a minute, whoa, buddy, what the fuck do you think you're doing? Okay,
Well, and there's
where's your
like
evidence that
80, there's 80 people dead. Every time they do it, people feign that they're upset, but nobody's done anything about it. These kinds of things are going to be addressed. And when you talk about the U.S. military, what is it, USMG?
USCMJ, U.S. Code of Military Justice?
Okay, so what people have to understand when you're in the military, if you are indicted or looked into at that point, it's not going to the DOJ and it's not going to court in the United States per se. It's going to be a military investigation and
Yes.
a military trial, which is dramatically different than coming in through the DOJ. It's going to be tougher. They're going to be harder on you. So that's something you have to consider when you're trying to decide whether or not to follow an order. And like you said, they're suggesting that these that he said uh, not to follow any orders. And frankly, just about every order Donald Trump's put out has been illegal or unlawful or whatever you want to call it. This guy isn't in a position mentally or otherwise or intellectually to make these kind of decisions. So almost every decision, every order he gives out is either unlawful or on the edges of unlawful.
Yeah, you're right. He's not making sound, logical decisions. I mean, he wasn't making those kind of decisions in his first term, but he
Right.
also wasn't doing the kind of things he's doing now. Now he's just lashing out on anybody and everybody. Um, and one of the things like that comes up with the USCMJ, and this isn't anything about Donald Trump and the orders he's giving, but just as a good example, there are things that are listed as illegal under the USCMJ that are not illegal under federal law or state
Right.
law or anything. And I don't know if they've ever changed it, but at one time, adultery, if you were a service member, was punishable, and you could get jail time if you were an active service member and you cheated on your spouse. I don't know if they still enforce it. I don't know if it's still a thing or if they've changed it. But that's not something, you do that out in, if you're a civilian and never served, you can't go to jail for just cheating on your spouse.
Right.
But it's something that when you're in, it just shows the difference of what they all have to deal with. And these officers and these soldiers and everything in all branches, they have to be looking at what's going on and making these tough decisions. And I don't I don't envy them for being in the position they're going to be in, having to decide at what point do we turn and say to the president, no, sir, we can't do that. Now, obviously, it's going to be the top generals that are going to be the ones to say no, sir, to the president directly. But
Yeah.
that's where it's going to have to start.
Well, I understand that there's been some talk that there's been an unusual number of people in the military contacting lawyers and such to ask questions about the difference between legal and illegal and what, in fact, they can do because it's kind of a tough situation. In the military, you're taught to follow all orders. Now, if you think something's illegal, how do you verify that? Because while you might think it's illegal, maybe in terms of letter of the law, it's not illegal. It is a tough position to put the rank and file in because they got to make decisions that are above their pay grade. Um, so it's difficult. It's got to be the upper echelon people, the officers, or even the upper officers like generals and such. At some point, that's where it's got to come from in order to expect the rank and file to really react to that.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the fact that they're even questioning, you know, with legal counsel. Now, they would have probably gone to, I'm assuming, I don't know that they would have gone to a private attorney. They would have probably gone to a JAG attorney,
Right.
Judge Advocate General, which is the legal branch of the military. I believe all branches use the same, like, they serve all branches, I believe. But they go ahead and that's who you would talk to. And they're getting a guidance and, when do we draw the line? Where do we, and the fact that we are talking about even discussing the fact that they're worried about having to follow orders that may be unlawful or put them in violation of the USCMJ. It is unusual. It is horrifying to think about that we have somebody in office as the president who is putting them in this position. And, hell, I think if we even had George W. Bush era Republicans, he'd be out on his ass.
Yeah, absolutely. We were talking about this before we went on. You were talking about the cracks that are starting to appear in Donald Trump, his administration, and what's going on. And there seems to be a lot of them. I've talked to people about this, and I don't know that everybody agrees with me because they don't see when they had to vote for the Epstein files, the fact that 247 to 1 or whatever it was, 227, whatever it was, to 1 in the House and unanimous in the Senate. In spite of the fact that Donald Trump says, yeah, go ahead and vote for it. He did that because he knew it was going to happen anyway, and he didn't want to look stupid. He didn't want to be weakened. But when you get that many folks, virtually everybody, to stand up and vote against Donald Trump, to me, that was a turning point and one of the biggest cracks. It may seem like nothing to some people, but once they've done that, once they've made that step, that weakens Donald Trump. And once we see other people do it, more people are going to pile on. I just think that vote is really going to have a big impact on the ultimate demise of Donald Trump.
You're right. And it was 427 to 1 in the
Fourth
House,
one is
unan-
right.
unanimous in the Senate. But beyond just the numbers, one of the things we talked about going into that vote is that Donald Trump said, yeah, go ahead, vote for it, because he thought it was going to get to the House, it was going to get over to the Senate, and they'd sit on it for a few weeks. There's no time frame for when they would have to bring it up for a vote. And he thought they were going to sit on it for a while and debate on it and, let it stew. And he thought, okay, as we've talked about, his idea was getting it, let me just buy me 2 or 3 more weeks. I'll come up with something brilliant. I'll get around it. I'll get away from it.
Right.
Well, what what happened? Senate goes, oh, it passed that thing, unanimous consent. It was in and out of the Senate in less than a couple of hours,
Well, and
maybe 3 hours tops.
the other person that was really freaked out about this was Mike Johnson. Mike Johnson was against this whole thing, yet he voted for it. Don't know why. He voted for it. And then when it was going over to the Senate, he says, well, I hope they shore up some of these rules and restrictions and stuff to make it a better bill. I suspect they will. It goes over. And then they just, through unanimous consent, pass it. When they talked to Mike Johnson in the hallway after it, he was visibly shaken by it. He didn't know what the fuck hit him. And this is what I mean. If Donald Trump thought they were going to waste some time, if Mike Johnson thought they were going to waste some time, and it goes to the Senate and it passes like that, some people aren't communicating. Some people on the Republican side aren't on the same page, and that's going to be troubling for Donald Trump and the people around him.
Oh, yeah. And in the term of politics, keep in mind the fact that they passed it in the span of a couple of hours in the Senate, that is like insanely fast in
Yeah,
political speak. I mean, we've been fighting this discharge petition going back to what? September, late
yeah,
August,
yeah,
in the House. It had been going on for 4 or 5 months. Well, Mike Johnson kept the House of Representatives out of session for like 6 or 7 weeks, just to avoid dealing with the discharge petition. And all of a sudden it passes in a matter of hours in the Senate. That's almost unheard of. It does happen with certain things. Certain things pass rather quickly, um, where they get it through in the same day or whatever, but not unanimously and not that fast, not typically. Like you said, there's cracks in the Republican Party. They're not on the same page. Mike Johnson thought they were going to come out, and didn't he make a comment saying one of the things he hopes the Senate shores up when they about the bill was that they would redact the names of all of the clients of Epstein because, well, they're victims too, something like that. If
yeah.
you redact the client names, then what's the point of releasing the files?
Exactly, exactly. Old white men trying to protect old white men, and so now Donald Trump then signs it because he virtually has no choice. He had to act like he wanted them to pass it because they were going to do it anyway, and if he was continued to fight against it, um, he would look weak. Well, up until the time when they were going to do this petition, he called Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert in and tried to cajole them and tried to threaten them into taking their names off the discharge petition. And then within a few days, all of a sudden, he's all right with them taking the vote. This was all about Donald Trump not looking stupid and weak. But in the process, he still looks stupid and weak.
Yeah, he was trying to control the narrative. He didn't want the vote to even take place. But once he realized that it was going to pass, and not only was it going to pass, once they hit the 218 mark and the vote was scheduled, suddenly you started hearing three or four more said, okay, I'm going to vote for it. Four or five more, a little bit later. Then we were hearing it was going to be 60 to 100 Republicans. And his eyes went, oh shit. Even in his diminished capacity, he was realizing how bad it was going to be if he still was publicly in opposition to releasing the files. So he said, okay, yeah, go ahead, release it. Because he thought that was going to make him look like a winner. Then he didn't realize how bad and how quickly this was going to get passed. And now I think he's still trying to figure out how they're going to get around following it and how they're going to figure out a way to not release the files or only release parts of it or to save himself. He's desperate and he doesn't know what the fuck to do.
No, he really doesn't. And a lot of people talked about the Senate. They thought it might be delayed or fucked around with, or maybe not even pass the Senate. Now, if they would have passed this with 10 votes, that may have happened in the Senate. It's my contention that with that vote of 427 to 1, the Senate has no fucking choice. They got to pass it. And then it's a matter of who wants to identify themselves as the person who wants to hide the Epstein files. Now, we had one in the House, Clay Higgins. He is a special kind of piece of shit. Yes, he's a sitting member of Congress. He's also a former cop who was fired because of racism and abusive activities. He's also the guy that tries to wrangle ways to get paid under the table because he owes hundreds of thousands of dollars in child support. This guy thinks he's a tough guy. Whenever you see him, he's cosplaying some old South cowboy type of guy, and you just want to punch that motherfucker in the face. He was the only one to vote against it. So when they saw that and they saw what happened to Clay Higgins, I think the people in the Senate said, I don't want to be on the wrong side of history. In spite of what we've always done for Donald Trump, this is a breaking point. And that's why I feel this was a breaking point. People finally stepped away from Donald Trump. And guess what? Nothing happened to him. That's so typical of a bully. I'm going to threaten you, and you better do it my way or else. And then they do it the opposite way, and nothing happens.
Yeah, one of the things with it, we talk about it being a breaking point. And one of the things I still say, and I still think could be true, is that when it comes time for these files to be released, now they're on the clock. They only have a month, and the clock is ticking. And it is supposed to be in, if what I read was correct, downloadable and searchable format. So you're talking a website where you can start searching. I don't know exactly how they would make it entirely searchable, but you start looking. People are going to have a field day when this stuff comes out. But if they start dicking around with this too much, when it passes with that kind of a majority, and they're still doing the House oversight investigation into the Epstein files, so they have access to some of these documents that the DOJ has, and they have access to other documents maybe the DOJ never had. They're going to know. Republicans are going to know if this administration's being truthful. And this may be the breaking point where Republicans say, not only did we break with you and force you to release them, you know what? We're going into the midterms, and we may have to just move past Donald Trump, and we may have to just vote to impeach. And I'm going to throw it out there, not saying definitively when you're going to start seeing it, but you probably won't see anything unless they fuck around too bad with the Epstein files. But starting to get close to March is when they may make a move because that starts the primary season. And, as they're worried about getting through primary season, they may decide, hey, we got to get rid of that motherfucker, or my seat, I may lose my primary. I may not have a seat next year, you know, et cetera. We got to do something. The other side of it could happen if primary season goes bad for these Republicans, they may have nothing to lose. And if they're looking at losing the House by 40 to 50 seats, again, they may say, fuck that guy and let's get him out of here.
Yeah. It's funny, you and I can sit and talk about this, and everything that's going on is something we and most everybody who's listened to us already saw 2 years ago, a year
Mm-hmm.
ago, 10 months ago. We've seen all this. This is no surprise to anybody. It's horrible. It's difficult to deal with, but it's not something we didn't know. And you can't tell me that the Republicans didn't know. They were just terrified of Donald Trump. I will bet this. I've heard as much. I've heard it inkled. What is in those Epstein files? What may be the most damning of Donald Trump? I'm willing to bet that members of the House and members of the Senate, both Democrats and Republicans, have already seen it. They know what's in it. They seem so terrified by it. They know what's in it. They don't want to talk about it for whatever reason, but they want it to come out for people to see themselves. I'm convinced there are people in Congress right now that know exactly what's in those documents, and they know what's about to hit.
Yeah, and I think if it is as bad as we are thinking it could be, um, and I think whatever's in there is probably far worse than just the idea that there are images of Donald Trump sitting with underage girls topless on his lap. I think
Yeah.
there's way more than that in there. Um, and that when push comes to shove, they're gonna say, okay, we got to move away from this guy. This guy's fucked. And there's going to be a lot of people, not just in Congress, not just in politics, but in this country and worldwide, who are going to have their reputations ruined. They are going to have their lives upended because of their connections. And you know what? They deserve everything that's coming to them and more.
And we're already seeing that. This is one of the reasons why I think a lot of people already know what's in there. The royal family in England stripped Prince Andrew of his princeship and everything, really stripped it. Now, we hadn't seen anything new on Prince Andrew, but apparently they not only know what Prince Andrew's involved in, they know what's coming. And that's why they reacted that way. So the emails come out, and this Larry Summers guy, who was Treasury Secretary under, I don't know, was it Obama? Maybe could have been Obama. He's a
Maybe.
Democrat. Um, it all came out with his interactions with Jeffrey Epstein, and it was pretty damning too. He decided to step away, resign from whatever the fuck he was doing, and just go into hiding because he couldn't deal with it. A lot of this stuff may or may not be statute of limitations, beyond the statute of limitations, but what it will do, it'll expose very wealthy, very powerful people, and it'll ruin their lives. And I don't feel bad about that. They spent a long time ruining young kids' lives. So this is just desserts at the very least if their lives and their reputations are ruined. They should be. I don't care if they're Democrat or Republican. If you abuse children, you're a piece of shit. I don't know if I should tell this story, but I'm gonna. I have a relative. This happened years ago. Had a relative who had a sibling that was arrested for child abuse in a sexual way. And it might have been news. And the person called me up, and I'm on the phone, and my wife's in the front. And this is a fairly close relative, not a blood relative, an in law. And he calls up and he said, I just got to tell you, my brother was arrested for such. I want you to hear it from me before you hear it on the news. Okay, fair enough. I appreciate that. I'm a little appalled. I'm a little surprised. And he said to me, what do you think they should do with people like that? And my wife was sitting next to me. And you know me, I tend to be blunt. I tend to speak my mind. I said, well, dude, I know it's your brother, but here's what I suggest they do with people like that. They put them on their knees, shoot them in the back of the head like execution style. And he was kind of mad and taken aback. And my wife was upset that I said that. And then when we hung up, and I said, you can be mad at me about that, but do you disagree with me? She goes, well, no. I go, good. We're right on the same page. But that's my point. These people need to be exposed for who they are. And if it ruins their lives, that's too bad. They made some poor choices. And for once in this country's history, wealthy people have to be accountable for their misdeeds, and there are many.
Yeah, I mean, um, they deserve every bit that's coming to them.
Hmm.
And they need to be held accountable. They've done some horrific things. And the fact of the matter is, you know, this whole thing with Epstein is, it was long running. This wasn't like it was over and done in 6 months, right? It went on for years, and the list of people who was involved is going to be very numerous.
Yeah.
You know, now some people maybe there is, I guarantee you, there's going to be some people that never did anything to children or underage girls, boys, whatever, that are probably connected. Maybe there was a party, things were going on in one part of the property, they didn't know about it. There's probably going to be a few people, but I guarantee you, the ones that did things that are in these files are going to be way more numerous than the ones that will be guilty by association or going to be connected to him through association. And they deserve every bit that's coming. They shouldn't be able to get jobs. Their names should be run through the mud. And you said the Larry Summers, he basically went into hiding. Now he probably has enough money that it's not going to matter if he works
And he's
again,
old. Yeah.
but doesn't matter. You know, they should, if their names are in those files, I think most companies should be, for the next several years, maybe they pay somebody in their HR department, these big companies, to run people's names through the files. If it is a searchable database, as long as it's accessible. Oh, you were in there? Sorry, job offer doesn't exist anymore. We don't want you.
Well, and if it's a searchable file, there'll be a list of our own made. People will go through that and make the list. But I will say this, you said something that, maybe there's some people in there that wasn't involved in the actual abuse of young kids. Okay. But the way Jeffrey Epstein, Donald Trump, and everybody else that we know was involved with this, even if they weren't involved in the actual abuse of kids, they knew what the fuck was going on. They knew what this
Maybe.
guy's reputation was. Maybe he was arrested. They knew
True. I mean,
after he was
after the
arrested.
fact, they probably knew They definitely knew what he was involved in. I'm saying there might be some people who didn't know in the moment what was going on. After the fact, why they didn't come forward is if they didn't know what was going on, that's another question. And that's something we need to find out.
Somebody went there one time for one reason and then never went back because they kind of figured out what was going on. First of all, they should have said something. Second of all, they should have looked into it before they went. I don't know that there's anybody who's tied in with Donald Trump or Jeffrey Epstein in this thing that I would call innocent because it was a pretty well known fact as to what was going on there. He was even arrested at least one time, and there were people still going after the fact. This is about wealthy people believing they can do whatever they want and doing just that. And there were other wealthy people that gravitated toward them and felt the same way. I think anybody tied to Jeffrey Epstein should be held accountable, whether it can be proven that you were involved in a sexual encounter or not. You were there. I mean, put it this way, if there's a crack house in your neighborhood and you go to that crack house not to do crack, but just to hang out because these are your buddies. And there's a raid in that crack house, you don't think you're getting arrested too? Because you're part of a serious crime. They're going to arrest you too. You may get off ultimately, but you're going to be arrested, exposed, and then you're going to have to defend yourself. And you're going to have to explain how I always hung out in this crack house, but I don't do crack. Does that really make you better? I don't think so. You're supporting people who are committing crimes. Yeah, I'm not going to buy these people that saying, well, I didn't do anything. I was just there for the fucking swimming. Fuck you. That's bullshit. I don't buy it.
Yeah, in your analogy of going to a local crack house or something is a good point. You're guilty by association just for being there and for not doing anything to stop it. Now, I think I mentioned this story before, and I had a friend of mine in high school, and I don't talk to this guy. He's no longer a friend. We haven't been friends or even, I don't think I've talked to him beyond seeing if I happened to see him in public in 20 years. But when it was actually about 20 years ago when this happened, he was 23. He was dating a 15-year-old.
Oh, wow.
Well, it gets worse. She was the one who ultimately turned him in. And in the course of the police investigation, they found out he was sleeping with her, her best friend, and some girl under 13 at the age of, and he was 23.
Wonder why he got turned
And
in by her.
well, actually, what happened, he had a party at his house, a drug party. They mostly marijuana, I guess. This is what I talked to him one time since he got out of prison. I gave him a chance to explain everything, and I said, I can't be associated with you because of, what I want to do with my life, and being connected to you is going to bring me down. And he understood, and we haven't talked since. But what he told me what happened is there was a raid at his house, and he gets charged on these drug charges. He goes to jail for the weekend, gets bonded out, and when he gets bonded out, he talked to her, this 15-year-old, and she told him, I thought you were giving up the weed and the drugs, etc. You said that's what you wanted. You get caught again, we're done. The very next weekend, there he has another party at his house. The cops show up the very next weekend. He gets taken off to jail again. And the way I understand it is that while he was sitting in jail on that second set of charges, she went into the police station and turned him in. And that's what started the investigation. And I couldn't be, you know, once I didn't know any of that was really going on until he got caught. And then
Yeah.
it was, you know what, I can't be around him, I can't be associated with him. And this was one of my best friends for a long time. And I couldn't do it. And that's what these people who were there, maybe they went one time to Epstein's Island and, or whatever, they were around him once and they got that weird vibe. They should have said, no, I can't do it. But because of the high profile nature of all the people involved, they should have also been saying, you know what, I'm going to talk to the media. I'm going to blow this thing wide open, and none of them did. Or
Or at
maybe
least
they should
told
have been
somebody
talking to the FBI.
covertly. Yeah, just go
Yeah.
to the FBI and give an anonymous type of thing. Somebody should have done that. Now, with your buddy, former buddy, um,
Yes. Former.
it all comes down to stupid. You get busted for drugs, so you have another drug party.
Very next
Regardless of how
weekend.
he
Yep.
got, regardless of how he got caught in the process, he's 22 years old. He's sleeping with a 15-year-old girl. There's no out of context there. There is no
Nope.
context where that works, and that brings up, what Megan Kelly said. These people are so desperate to protect Donald Trump, they will say the stupidest shit. And this has come back to haunt her. She was trying to talk about Jeffrey Epstein, and she was trying to distinguish the meaning of pedophilia. And apparently, there's maybe a different name or way to say something um, with girls that are closer to the 14, 16-year range. But she was trying to say, well, he wasn't a pedophile because the kid wasn't 8. She was 15 years old, trying to distinguish the fact that girl being 15 is a better situation or a more acceptable situation than the 8-year-old girl. Well, that's absolute bullshit. There is, she referred to 15-year-olds as barely legal. No, dumb bitch, that's absolutely illegal in just about every fucking state in the union. And Megan Kelly should know that. But she was trying so hard to protect Donald Trump in this situation. She was willing to put herself out on that cliff. And now she's getting pounded for it, as well she should.
Yeah. I mean, I know what she was trying to say, and she was trying to make it sound like it wasn't as bad because the girls were older. And there is, I don't remember the exact term, and I've seen various videos on TikTok where they try to explain it that there are differing terms depending on the age range of the victim, that there are a wide range of terms for it, but it doesn't matter. The common term, the way we all describe it, is pedophilia. And that's what's
Yeah.
important. It doesn't matter that there is a grammatical distinction. As far as anybody of a reasonable mind is concerned, they're one and the same. And trying to say a 15-year-old is effectively an 18-year-old is, you know, not going to work. I mean, that's like a different coworker I had years ago. He said he waited to date this girl till her 18th birthday. But, he knew her, he was talking to her, as friends, is what he said, when
Yeah.
she was 17, weeks before she turned 18, and then just waited for the calendar to magically flip over. Still gave that creepy vibe. Still gave a
Absolutely.
little bit of this isn't right. Like you're walking that rope, very, very fine line, and you know right where that is. That tells me if that line wasn't there and it was a little lower, you would have, if the age was 17, you would have said, okay, that's, you were only looking at what the barely legal point was, and you're trying to walk that tightrope. And that whole thing was a very weird situation. And then trying to say that 15 equals 18 is kind of like doing that same thing. Well, saying, yeah, it's close and it's different. It shouldn't be. It really shouldn't. And it's coming back to bite her, which is good because anybody who says stuff like that deserves to have it come back to bite them.
Yeah. It reminds me of when I was a little kid and I'd be in the back seat of the car and my brother and I'd be kind of fighting and yelling at each other and stuff like that. Mom would say, "Don't touch your brother." And then you'd go, "I'm not touching him. I'm not touching him. I'm not touching him."
Yep.
Trying to skate that line. And the idea that you're trying to be an apologist for this, it wasn't just her either. I've heard some things on TikTok. I've heard some other people, just people out of the crowds, trying to justify the whole idea of being involved with, teenage kids. Certainly illegal. I mean, the bottom line is whether it's 15 or 8, it's still illegal. So there really is no differentiation in it. You're just trying to say, well, he is not as bad as going after 8-year-olds. Still illegal. Still fucking illegal. Still sick. Um, Now, with these files, Donald Trump has signed it. Like you said, he has 30 days to release it. Pam Bondi does. Pam Bondi's freaking the fuck out too. I don't know if you saw her in her press conference, but she does not know how to answer shit. All she could say is, "Well, we'll do everything that the law tells us we have to do." Yeah, but what's your answer to the thing is it's going to go back to her, and they're going to have to piece this together and somehow reveal it in 30 days. What do you think the odds are that they try to come up with some um, hurdle, some angle, some loophole to delay it even longer? I've often said that I don't know that we'll see the Epstein files until Donald Trump's out of office. I still kind of think that's the case. What are you feeling about this demand for it being released in 30 days?
Well, one of the things I've mentioned in the videos and in the podcasts I've done about it is that once that 30-day benchmark hits, they're going to be dealing with Freedom of Information Act requests. There's going to
Oh,
be all sorts of, and they're going to have to deal with, people wanting access. And if they try to say, well, national security, or if they're wanting to say, ongoing investigation or whatever, they potentially could be facing lawsuits over it. And the courts are going to get involved. And when you have something like what Donald Trump put out on Truth Social, hey, Pam, investigate the Democrats on the Epstein files, including XYZ. He listed 4 or 5 different people and a couple of businesses. Well, if they try to say ongoing investigation, and that gets before a judge, they could try to sit there and say, okay, prove there's an ongoing investigation, but also prove it's not vindictive prosecution.
right,
And it could, this
right.
it could get brought potentially by say I'm going to pick on them because why not say CNN or ABC or CBS wanting to get a story out of the Epstein files. They could be doing that, and this administration hasn't thought of that as a potential way out. They're just thinking, well, what about John Q. Public? We're going to
Yeah.
prevent them from getting access to it. But these mega media companies are going to be wanting to get access to this information. It's not going to end well. And I don't see how I can see them trying a few things, but that goes back to what we were talking about before. When they try to delay the files or redact a bunch of stuff or pull some bullshit, these aren't the only copies that are out there. You
Right.
know, we got those emails that came out last weekend about Donald Trump and Bubba and some of the other ones that were out there that are just horrible. Um, those came from the Epstein estate. There are other groups that know what is in these files. And what's to prevent them from just releasing what they have if the DOJ doesn't? And this could lead to the Republicans breaking with Donald Trump, saying, okay, he's got to go. We got to try our luck with Vance and let's impeach and remove him. I guarantee there's at least some discussion going on behind the scenes that we will never hear about where congressional Republicans are talking to each other from both chambers, going, when do we make the move? Are we going to make the move? And if we held the vote today, do we have the votes in the Senate to remove him?
Well, and to be honest with you, after that vote the other day, unanimous vote essentially in the House and the Senate, that's got to make Donald Trump a little nervous. They were strong enough and not scared enough to vote against him in spite of what he said. I mean, that's why I'm saying it shows the cracks. It shows Donald Trump weakening. The other thing about the 30-day thing, if they start throwing up hurdles or trying to delay this thing, that's going to be a PR nightmare. They already think Donald Trump is hiding it. That's not going to help.
No, no, it's not. And the more they try to do any sort of bullshit, all eyes are on them. And the House is like the House Oversight Committee's already still doing their investigation. They're watching them. Thomas Massey basically said, still, even though they voted to release the names or to release the files, he goes, they fuck around. I'll get a list of names of clients of Epstein from the victims, and I'll read it on the House floor. Marjorie Taylor Greene has said the same thing in the past, and that is the last thing that this administration wants them to do because you can't sue them over it. You can't get
Right.
defamation damages over it because of the speech and debate clause. And there's going to be media coverage of it when that shows up. It's going to
Oh,
be
yeah.
everywhere. Even if some of the names that get read on the House floor, even if they're not fully listed or they're not full clients or whatever, just the fact that they were included in this list would be devastating to anybody whose name gets read out on the House floor.
Well, and there's always the chicken littles out there that look at the negative side and the sky is falling and all that shit. So a lot of people are saying, yeah, well, he's scrubbed the whole thing and redacted his name for everything, and that's why he won't get caught. I find that hard to imagine. I mean, we're talking about like 100 terabytes or something to go through all of that and to get everything out of it. First of all, it'll look stupid. It will look heavily redacted, which people will not accept, and again, be a PR nightmare. Secondly, Donald Trump and the Republicans always fuck up. So they will leave something that will be an implication. Um, Not to mention the fact that now that this is a law, anybody, the lower ranking people who were involved in destroying or redacting this thing illegally, they're breaking a law. And when
Yeah.
this is all said and done, they could be indicted. They could go on trial. So while I'm not saying that they haven't tried to scrub this thing, I don't think it's going to be enough because you only need a couple things. You don't need all 100 terabytes or whatever it is. And frankly, for Donald Trump, we may have enough just on those emails and anything else the Epstein estate throws out there. Um, I'm not as worried about him eradicating parts of this thing because it would be obvious, and that will start a whole nother fucking problem for him.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, when if they do eradicate too much of it, like I said, these aren't the only copies. There's other groups that are going to come out and say, "Wait a minute, okay, just I don't know, as an idea, if there's something with say just even 5 pages that's supposed to be all together, but Donald Trump is named on page two, and they get rid of page two, and they try to only release pages one, one, three, four, and five. Well, wherever that originated from, that group could say, wait a minute, that document doesn't look right. You're missing a page. Here's the actual page that fits in that's going to make that look better. This thing is going to turn into a PR nightmare. Everybody's going to dogpile on him. And when it all comes down, like you said, the lower level people that are dealing with this, they're the ones that are going to have criminal liability to start.
Right.
And as long as we have somebody decent in the DOJ when the Democrats take back over, they're all going to be staring at facing a lot of potentially federal crimes. And I'm okay with any and all of them going to prison.
Yeah. Well, and hopefully, the other thing too to consider about the DOJ, the FBI, it doesn't look like Pam Bondi or Cash Patel have a really good handle or control over their respective departments. Here's what we know: there are people in the DOJ that are lifelong employees that care about rule of law, that care about oaths and that sort of thing, and they are absolutely appalled by what's going on, and they're upset, but they don't want to lose their pension and their jobs and that sort of stuff. Here's what I know about Donald Trump. Donald Trump's administration is probably one of the leakiest administrations ever. And I'm suspecting that if things get slowed down with the Epstein files or stuff, we're going to see things getting leaked over and above the Epstein estate files. We're going to get some things leaked. And what do you need to get leaked? A picture? a video, an audio recording, a signature from Donald Trump involved somehow, it ain't going to take much. And the thing about it is, we should be looking at taking down Donald Trump, because once Donald Trump is taken down, then we can expose all the rest of it, because that's important too. The other people involved, it's not just about Donald Trump, it's about everybody that's involved. But sometimes you got to cut the head off the snake.
Yeah, you're right. And one of the things MAGA likes to ask is, well, what if your favorite politician's in there? Okay, then they'll no longer be my favorite politician. Hold them accountable. What if your favorite
Absolutely.
celebrity is in there? I don't care who it is. You know, if they're in the files, and I don't care if it's my favorite movie of all time or, a comfort movie or whatever, because we all have those movies that you go to just to have on as background noise. You've heard 1,000 times and you could probably quote it line for line. But I don't even care if it's that movie. And if it's an actor in that movie, I'll never watch it again if they're connected to the Epstein files. Why would I? You know, I don't care who it is. If they're there, we need to know who the underlings are. But getting Donald Trump out of the way, he's not even the head of the snake of this whole ring. That was Epstein.
Right.
He's just the biggest political hurdle right now that we have to deal with. And getting past him politically is important.
People will always say, well, Biden could have released it and he didn't. And that's not necessarily true, because we had the Ghislaine Maxwell investigation going on. So everything was pretty much locked up. But at the same time, there was a period of time when Biden could have released information. Um, and Donald Trump could have released information when it first happened. And since he's been in office, this is part of a bigger problem. This is the class war thing, where because people are powerful and wealthy, it's almost like the Enron thing, too big to fail. They get a pass because of their wealth and power. And that's something that the Republicans are certainly guilty of, but even the Democrats to a certain extent. I mean, Merrick Garland could have gone after Donald Trump first day in his job, but chose not to because he didn't want to be too political. That's what we have in this country. We have people on different levels, and at the top level,
Mm-hmm.
you can get away with anything, you can do anything, you can say anything. And that's the thing that's got to change here. And this Epstein thing will be the first good break in breaking that problem we have in this country.
Yeah, you're right. Because like you said, there's a lot of high value or high wealth people, high power people that are just, they feel like they've risen to a level where they can get away with anything.
Yep.
And that's part of why they were doing whatever they were doing with Epstein and getting these so-called massages, which we know what that's actually code for.
Yeah.
Um, and all of that. They felt that they could do it, get away with it, and not have any repercussions. And it's time that those things start coming down. And then once we do, we need to keep the pressure on, find the next group and go after that and just keep going until we start leveling the playing field, because it is supposed to be everyone equal under the law. If I was connected and did all of the things that was people connected to Epstein was doing, but say instead of doing it on a private island and I have millions and millions of dollars, I did all of those things in my area, and they finally found me. They'd throw me in a cell somewhere here in Iowa, throw away the key, and I'd be facing life probably for all the charges that got racked up.
Perfect
But because
example.
I'm not wealthy, I'm not connected.
Perfect illustration is your friend
Former friend.
who was doing drugs and having sex with a 15-year-old. He went to jail and is held accountable. He isn't doing anything different than half those people, if not all those people, with the Epstein thing. He's done nothing any
Yep.
different. I'm not trying to make what he did any lesser than what it was. He deserved to be held accountable. But why is it that we have the Epstein situation? Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell get arrested and convicted of child sex trafficking, but nobody that they trafficked to, who was also committing a crime, has even been investigated. That tells you where we are in this country. Certain people think they
Yep.
can get away with anything. And the reason why it's important to expose these people and make them held accountable It's to stop this shit. Because I'll guarantee you right now, there are rich people that maybe not tied up with Jeffrey Epstein are doing similar shit because they know they can get away with it.
Yeah, and if we find that next ring, they need to be held just as accountable. And I think maybe I'm wrong. I've been wrong before that if there is another ring out there, which there probably is,
I
um,
guarantee you there is.
when they when we bust that one, the public outcry and how we handle this one now is going to affect how that one gets dealt with later when they find
And
it.
it,
And then
and it'll make
they're
other
going to
people
keep building
feel
off of it.
they'll think twice about getting involved in something like this if somebody's been held accountable. If a Bill Clinton or a Donald Trump or whoever is in the list, if they get held accountable, they're going to be less likely to want to engage in that sort of thing. And that's what we should be doing, as well as prosecuting people who commit crimes. We ought to be trying to do things to avoid these crimes happening again. And the only way to do that is through accountability.
Exactly. I mean, one of the things why uh, the punishments are supposed to be severe so that you don't want to go do those crimes. You don't want to get caught. These people haven't even had an investigation. We don't even know who their names are this time around. Next time, if they handle it better and they actually do investigations, whoever the next Epstein is, like one of the questions I have about this Epstein thing, okay? We Part of the emails that have come out have been involved in with Jeffrey Epstein talking to his brother Mark.
Right.
Why hasn't Mark been charged? Clearly he knew
Why
about stuff.
why hasn't that writer been charged?
Same thing.
I mean, he sounds like what's his name again? Oh, fuck.
Wolf,
Wolf,
Mike
Michael
Wolf.
Wolf. If you read the emails, there was nothing necessarily implicating him in something sexual, but he was certainly complicit in this thing. I mean, fuck. He's advising Jeffrey Epstein how to blackmail Donald Trump. This fucker's a criminal too.
Well, I mean,
You
that's not
know,
hard. Donald Trump opens his mouth, says something stupid, puts himself in a bad position all the time. Getting the evidence to blackmail Donald Trump is, fairly simple.
but the fact that he was that close to Jeffrey Epstein and he was advising Jeffrey Epstein makes me a little suspicious as to his
Yeah,
involvement in this whole situation.
yeah, I agree with you on that. The whole thing just seems weird, and Donald Trump gets blackmailed by Michael Wolff, gets blackmailed by Jeffrey Epstein. Makes you wonder how many of his decisions are actually of his own when he in either one of his terms, and how much was he listening to somebody else when they'd say, "Hey, go do this or else." We had heard during his first term that there were tapes of Donald Trump engaging in a particular activity with Russian women over the age of 18, that it was all on the up and up. But just because of the activity that was involved, he didn't want that getting out. Well, how many decisions did he make in Russia's favor because he didn't Russia had those tapes and they didn't want to get out?
I have a feeling if Russia has those tapes, they have a lot of tapes. They have a lot of tapes because Vladimir Putin is kind of he's an evil bastard, but he's a smart guy and he knows how to control a stupid fuck like Donald Trump. And clearly, he has the ability to control Donald Trump. I mean, we've always questioned why he had these private meetings when no one else was involved. This kind of uh, shows a different possibility in it, as opposed to just doing illegal political shit. There may be more to this. He's, maybe Vladimir's Bubba. Who the fuck knows?
That's I
How to
suggested that in one of my podcasts. I said maybe that was Donald Trump's, or that was Vladimir Putin's nickname for himself, is that he's Bubba. And you know, we don't know. That one never really took off as far as being a big conspiracy theory out there. The two that stuck were it was either Bill Clinton or it was the horse. I don't know out of those three which one's worse. which
Well,
was worse for Donald Trump.
there's another guy that was a GOP donator, and he was a lot of money, and they called him Bubba too. People say, well, what if it's not? I don't care what it is. If there's a picture of Donald Trump giving anybody a blowjob, that doesn't matter who the guy was. It doesn't matter. It destroys
No,
Donald Trump, and I would love to see that. Now there's another
it,
indication of something else out there that's very implicating. A guy by the name of Eugene Vindman, who is a member of Congress. He's got the twin brother that they tried to take to court. What was his name? Alexander Vindman and Eugene Vindman. Okay. Now,
okay.
Eugene Vindman worked for the um, the White House back in his first term. And when Donald Trump would have phone calls with leaders or whatever, um, he would have to listen in and analyze it and break it down. And that's he was an intelligence officer, and that's what he did. Now he's a member of Congress. He came out the other day and he said, "Listen, I've heard this conversation. There was a conversation between Donald Trump and the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, MBS, right after Jamal Khashoggi, the American journalist, was killed in a very brutal way." He said that phone call is abhorrent, atrocious, and horrible, and very damning of Donald Trump. Donald Trump's conversation with that person. So Vindman stood up and said, "I'm asking the White House to release that audio tape." Now they're not going to release the audio tape, but I have a feeling some people maybe have a copy or two if it's that bad. This is what I'm saying. There's going to be a lot of people who are going to get frustrated with Donald Trump getting away with things, and shit's going to drop out of the sky. And it's not going to be hard to
Oh
find
yeah.
something that's damning of Donald Trump.
No, when the snowball starts going, it is going to engulf everything. The Republicans are gonna make a move on Donald Trump at some point. I firmly believe that.
I agree.
If the Big Mac doesn't get him first, which is probably their best hope,
Yeah,
honestly, what the Republicans really probably want is for the Big Mac to get him very publicly on stage. That way, there's no dissent. There's no, oh, well, they're just staging it, that, oh, he's not really dead, those kind of things. Because the MAGA side is going to not believe it. They're going to be waiting the 3 days to see if he comes out of the tomb,
yeah,
um,
no doubt.
which ain't going to happen. Um, but I think one of the things as far as what with these files, and not even though the rest of it's going to dogpile on him, I think the Epstein files are the one thing why Republicans are going to be willing to move away from Donald Trump. Is it might be the one thing that keeps that 30% of the MAGA base continuing to vote for Republicans and not just saying, fuck it, I'm never voting again.
Right.
Because they're trying to shore up their numbers. Their numbers don't look good going forward. Their biggest voting block is the baby boomers, and they're dying off. Most of the silent generation's gone. Um, uh, if they would only take goddamn Chuck Grassley, because he's silent generation, but that guy's holding on for dear life.
Well,
But
like I've heard data that says 5,000 baby boomers are dying per day. Per day. It's not going to take too long to deplete the baby boomers. Let's be honest, the baby boomers have been the strongest voting bloc because they were the biggest. They were the boomers. Now you got millennials and Gen Zs and stuff like that. They're much smaller groups, and they don't tend to vote Republican. So this is a real problem for the Republicans. And like you were talking about with the cracks, after this was signed by Donald Trump, this Epstein file thing, there are GOP members coming out in public, in the press, saying to Pam Bondi, "You better not slow walk this. You better not slow
mhm.
walk this." You got all these people that voted to release the files. The cracks are there, and they are getting bigger every day with the Republican Party. There still is a faction of people that will support Donald Trump forever, but they're the dumbest and they're the smallest group. And this isn't boding well for Donald Trump. Any support he had out of fear or whatever, it's slipping away, and it's slipping away fast.
And that slipping away fast is only going to continue to get faster
It's not going to
every
get
single day.
better.
No, no, because he's not, but Donald Trump is convinced, give him enough time, he will think of a way out of it.
No,
On
not Donald Trump.
on one of my podcasts, I likened it to a friend of mine. And I think I made this analogy on your podcast too a while back. But this is the way I think with Donald Trump and how he thinks, right? My friend started out, he was like $50 short 1 month for his bills. Took some
Yeah,
stuff to the pawn shop, got the $50 he needed. Next month comes around, still $50 short to meet all of his bills, and he owes the pawn shop a little bit of money. Takes more stuff to the pawn shop, gets the 50 he needs, pays the pawn shop the interest. Convinced he's going to end up figuring a way out of this. That something's going to happen. He's going to get it all straight. Next month comes around, still short the money on his bills, and he owes even more interest. Takes even more stuff to the pawn shop. Before he knows it, he's considering a second job just to make enough money to keep paying the pawn shop the interest on all the shit he took over because he can't pay all of his bills. When
right.
the smart move would have been in the first spot when you're $50 short on your bills and it looks like you're going to permanently be that, you get another job, you make enough money to get that $50 and you move on. But he didn't do that. But he kept thinking, just give me another month, I will find a solution. Give me another month, I will find a solution. He never did, and he ultimately lost everything he took to the pawn shop because he came to a point where he couldn't afford to pay him anymore.
Right.
But
And
that's Donald Trump in a nutshell.
you're absolutely right. That is Donald Trump in a nutshell. That is a narcissist in a nutshell. They keep thinking they can figure this out. And unfortunately, Donald Trump is at a point just before the crashing point for most narcissists. They've always been pretty successful in managing the problems they have. They can spin, they can divert, they can do whatever. But they always come to a point where it starts to build up, and there's a lot of problems. We got the healthcare issue. We've got the economy issue. We've got the jobs issue. We've got the Epstein issue. It's just too much for him to manage all of it. And eventually it caves in on him. And that's when the people, the people that are now starting to look sideways at him, uh, we're at that point where the avalanche is about to start. You got drips and drabs of mistakes and problems that Donald Trump has, but it's like an avalanche. You get a spot here, you get a spot here, you get people not liking you there. Eventually, it gets to the point where it all builds up and just pours down the mountain. And that's what's ahead for Donald Trump. The problems, the people going against him, it's going to be insurmountable. He will get buried.
Oh yeah, and he's going to be blindsided if that day comes, like I think is coming, and I'm going to throw her out there as somebody who might do it. Say Marjorie Taylor Greene introduces articles of impeachment against Donald Trump.
Yeah.
He's not going to see it coming, and when it happens, one of the things I have been saying is I don't expect House Republicans to issue articles of impeachment unless they have the votes in the Senate and they know for a fact he's going to be removed.
Oh, absolutely.
Period.
You like they say, don't take a shot at the king unless you know you're going to hit him. And
Right.
if the Republicans do that, and people say, "Oh, the Republicans will never do that," I don't know. Did you think the 527 people would vote against him on the Epstein thing, the Republicans included? There's going to be a lot of stuff happening that we wouldn't have expected. To be perfectly honest with you, what's going on with Donald Trump and what will happen with Donald Trump, I've always said this is going to happen. The fact that it's taken this long is just fucking with my head. I thought this was something that was going to happen long ago because the writing's on the wall. But either they couldn't see the writing or they were too afraid. But now they're less afraid because they're seeing he's weak and he's not going to be doing his threats are not as strong as they were. And once they find out that he can't do anything, fucking over. I just thought it happened a
Yeah.
lot earlier than it is.
Well, so did I. I really thought they would have pushed back on him much earlier than this, but they're trying to get everything they can out of him. But they're worried, like politicians are, about getting elected, and they're worried about the midterms. They're coming, and we're inching closer and closer to primary season.
Yeah,
And you know,
like
I
months.
think, yeah, first primary is early March.
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact date. Somebody in I think it was Will's live. I jumped in on the other night. Gave maybe it was Truckers live. It was one of the two. Told us it was like March 7th or something, whatever that first Tuesday in March is.
Telling you as the
I think.
campaigning starts in January.
I mean, there's a campaigning going on already, but yeah, it's pushing, and they're going to be looking at it going, "Oh fuck, we got to do something." And then as you get past the primaries, like once your state's had the primary, you're campaigning hard going all the way to November.
Yeah.
And they're going to be looking and making decisions going, we got to get rid of this guy. Oh, fuck. And one of the things I've suggested numerous times on your uh, podcast and multiple times on mine is that the Republicans are their only play they have. And it's not a good one because voters my generation and younger, maybe even Gen X and younger, are way more informed than previous generations. And we
Absolutely.
don't buy the bullshit as well as the older generations. But here's what I'm thinking the Republicans may try to do. They remove Donald Trump, impeach and remove him, use the Epstein files as their reason. He's gone. Trying to keep the MAGA base. JD Vance gets put in. JD Vance picks whoever as his running bait in hell. Because sounding like a moderate, maybe it's Marjorie Taylor Greene. Again, doesn't matter.
That would be so horrible.
I mean, I said that just to get a laugh, but doesn't matter who he picks as his running mate. But now as they're running toward the midterms elections, the way they can phrase their campaigning is going, well, you got to keep us in power in Congress. JD Vance just took over. He's got to have time to fix everything Biden fucked up. He's going to fix the things that Donald Trump didn't quite get fixed yet. Give him time to fix it. Give us power to fix it. That's going to be how he's going to run with it. And if they wait till after the midterms and they put JD Vance in and they've lost the House and lost the Senate, like we've talked about being an option, he's going to say, they're going to say, well, see, JD Vance couldn't get anything done. He couldn't fix anything because the Democrats were in control. So you got to give JD another term and put Republicans back in Congress so we can fix it. I
Yeah.
don't think that's going to work with the younger generations, but
No.
I can see them trying it.
Well, they got to try something. And for me, I don't know what you think about this. If they're waiting till now or 2 months from now to try to rectify things so they can make a showing in the midterms, I think it's way too late. No matter what they do, they're fucked because people are struggling, people are suffering, people don't like not having money or having jobs or anything. They can try to fix it. They can get rid of Donald Trump, put JD Vance in, but it ain't going to be enough for the midterms. And then if the midterms go badly for the Republicans, whoever's president is going to do nothing for 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, well, they may do nothing for 2 years, but what you could see, and this is just something that I've kind of popped into my head, is again, as they're trying to maybe distance themselves from JD or trying to spin up things going into the general, maybe they pass things around JD Vance, or maybe they start working in a bipartisan nature to address some of the things. And they, even if the Democrats are in charge, they get some stuff done to make things better just because they're afraid of getting their asses completely killed in 28 and giving Democrats the chance to run on fixing everything and having power potentially for 20 years.
Yeah. But one of the things I suggested, and I think I brought it up to you, and you kind of, because of who I named to be in that spot, thought it probably wouldn't work, and it made sense too. But if you get rid of Donald Trump, you've got a lot of incompetent people in the administration. You got J.D. Vance, who's not popular with Republicans, is kind of a dumbass. If you really want to rehabilitate the organization, the party, what they really need to do is get rid of Donald Trump, force JD to pick some kind of relatively normal vice presidential candidate, and then impeach JD Vance too. So you've got a whole new fresh face for the final 2 years or whatever. That sounds crazy. It's never been done, but look where we are.
Yeah, you're right. And what I said about it then, I think if I remember correctly, and what the way I still think about it is if the Republicans want to try it, I could see them making those kind of moves.
Yeah,
Here's the thing. The bar for impeachment the bar for impeachment for charging is simple majority. That's not that hard for the Republicans to pull off. They might even be able to get enough between, even if all of their party go against JD Vance in the House right now, they would have the numbers. They could get rid of JD Vance, or they could charge JD Vance
right,
and go with somebody better. But in the Senate, it's 2/3.
right.
Well, right now, they would need 14 Democrats to side with them. If those charges aren't lock solid and good, and the Democrats are getting a sniff that, an idea, a feeling that they're trying to do what we're saying here, that they
Yeah,
just want to get rid of Vance to put in somebody better to shore up their position for 28, they're not going to side with impeaching JD Vance. They're not going to do it. They would save JD Vance if the charges were weak. Like, let's just talk about Bill Clinton getting impeached for perjury about lying about whether or not he had an affair. Something like that. If that's what they used against JD Vance, they'd probably save Vance. But if they had something serious like, he's fucking up the Epstein file release, or he kept the bombings of boats in Venezuela or whatever like that going, maybe Democrats would have no choice. If the
yeah,
Republicans decide to go that route and try to get rid of Trump, get rid of Vance, and bring in somebody better, it had better be a lock solid good case, or the Democrats won't side with it. They had better back the Democrats into a corner to force them to do it.
yeah. Well, given that topic, we're coming toward the end, but I wanted to bring this up too. As I said before, with this whole Epstein file vote thing, the one guy that seems to be the most freaked out is Mike Johnson, and I think Mike Johnson knows his job is hanging by a thread. He could be easily twisting in the wind. I see the Republicans ultimately wanting to get rid of him at some point. Um, but some people have suggested that the Democrats would force the issue and try to do all they could to keep Mike Johnson in the position just to let him continue to flail and fuck up. What do you think about that?
Well, I've said this before. What I think they might do with Mike Johnson is we still have a vote coming up in the Senate sometime either yet this month or next on the Affordable Care Act subsidies.
Right.
That was promised by John Thune. Mike Johnson is refusing yet or not saying whether the House would take it up. What if the Democrats go to Mike Johnson and say, look, when that bill comes over, you bring it up for a vote and you get us 4 Republicans or 5 Republicans, whatever we need to pass it. You get enough votes. You don't have to vote for it yourself, but you get us the votes. Make it happen. And when they go to impeach, or when they go to vacate your position as speaker, we'll save you, because there wouldn't be enough Republican led votes unless almost every Republican voted to get rid of Mike Johnson, including Mike Johnson, because he would get a vote in that.
Right.
It would take almost all of them without Democratic support. I think what the Democrats are going to do is if the Republicans really try to go after Mike Johnson and get rid of him, especially if it keeps coming up multiple times, Democrats will keep saying to Mike Johnson, "This is what we want this time.
Yeah,
We'll save you when they bring that vote up, but you're giving us X, Y, or Z. And if you don't deliver X, Y, and Z, the next time they bring it up, because they keep trying to get rid of you, we won't save you. Look what we did to Kevin McCarthy."
yeah, absolutely. Well, you brought up the ACA, and we're, like I say, we're down to the waning moments of this. What do you think is going to happen with the ACA? The Senate says they're going to vote on it. Presumably, maybe, depending on what kind of leverage can be used, the House will vote on it. Is something, what do you think is going to happen in terms of the ACA subsidies? How do you think that's all going to end up?
Uh, Spitballing here. I think they're both going to vote on it. I think it will pass. Now, and I think that's just because of public pressure.
Yeah,
Now, one of the things Donald Trump has said, though, he's not going to sign it.
right.
He won't sign it. Now, he might sign this dumb plan from Rick Scott, but that's another story. Um, but I think what may happen is as it gets closer to an actual scheduled vote in both chambers, you may see something similar happen with the ACA credits as what happened with this discharge petition to release the files.
Yeah,
It looks like it may just barely pass. Then all of a sudden, you might start seeing members break and break and break. Maybe since it's starting in the Senate, maybe it passes with 70 votes,
yeah,
80 votes, and goes over to the House. And again, pressure. If it goes through with a veto proof majority, Donald Trump would be dumb as shit not to sign it.
yeah. Yeah, he would be dumb as shit. And the reason I think it will pass, as much as the Republicans say, no, we don't want to sign that, we don't want to expand the subsidies for the ACA. As I understand it, the ACA, 70% or 80% of people carrying ACA coverage are in red states. To not sign that would be absolutely devastating for Republicans to be identified as somebody who's taken away the health care from literally tens of millions of people or made it impossible to afford. That's not going to help them in the midterms. As much as they're saying what they're saying because Donald Trump wants them to say it, Donald Trump also wanted the Epstein files hidden. But clearly, a big majority of Republicans said, no, that's too fucking far. And I have a feeling they'll feel the same way with regards to the ACA because it's too damaging to too many Republicans in this country to not sign that off.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think right now they're going to posture against it for as long as they can. But then when push comes to shove and it gets time for that vote, I think they vote to pass it, just like they did with the Epstein files. They were doing everything they could. Oh, we don't really need to do this. Oh, not that. And all of a sudden it passes with almost a unanimous consent in both chambers.
Right.
I mean, I think that's where this is headed. Maybe not unanimous, but it is going to be something where they'll posture for as long as they can, and then ultimately they're going to cave. Will it be enough to save them in the midterms? No, because any of those sound bites of them saying, "Well, we don't need to vote for it" or whatever, is going to come right back up to haunt them. Right? They think they can just say whatever they want, and people are going to forget every year more and more social media and places like here on the podcasts, we're talking about it more. This information is being regurgitated, people are hearing it, and it's not as easy for them to end up hiding as much as what they had in the past.
Right. They can't hide anything. And I'll say this, and I'll see what you think about this. If they don't sign the subsidies and people crash out in this healthcare, they either can't afford it or they're kicked off of it. Tens of millions of people happen to lose healthcare or can't afford healthcare. If that happens, I can almost guarantee you that come 2028, universal health care or Medicare for all will be very popular because these
Yes.
Republicans will be getting their ass kicked over this health care issue. People who may have been against it now have lost their health care, and they're going to, you got to save us. I need some kind of relief. And then when they bring up Medicare for all, there's going to be more people with a stomach for it.
Definitely. And there's so many problems, not necessarily with the idea of Medicare for all, but with the messaging behind Medicare for all, that if they can just fix the messaging, especially if, like you said, people lose their health care, these ACA subsidies, if they expire and, people are getting their ass kicked because of health care, it's already going to drive demand up. And if they can just fix the messaging problems with universal health care, Medicare for all, whatever you want to call it, the public health option, um, you would get so many people in support of it. It's not funny. It's kind of like the Affordable Care Act, right? I remember right around the time it passed, I was having a conversation with somebody who was a hardcore Republican against that evil Obamacare. And I said, well, do you think insurance companies should be able to say to a child that is just born that they find a birth defect or something that they can fix, that they're not going to cover that because calling it a pre-existing condition? Do you think that's right? Well, no. Okay, so you'd be in favor of legislation saying insurance companies can't do that? Well, yeah, of course I would. Okay. What do you think about insurance companies being able to say, well, you got a pre-existing condition because you switched jobs and we don't want to cover you for a year or two or three or whatever their term is? Because, oh, I don't like that at all. Okay, so you'd be in favor of legislation that would fix that. Well, yeah, and I just went through everything. A lot of the items that the ACA fixed and was in favor of every bit of it, but he couldn't stand Obamacare.
Right. Well,
Same thing with universal health care.
you talk about the messaging with Democrats, and I think the Democrats have to do exactly what you and I do. We take these news stories, we break them down into simple terms so they make sense, and then people understand really what the issue is. I think you could say something like, and I'm just throwing some numbers out. Say you have health care now and it costs you $12,000 a year, $1,000 a month for your whole family. Say you're paying $1,000 a month for your whole family every month, total of $12,000 a year. Or we could raise your taxes 3 grand a year and you would have the health care you need whenever you need it. You have to be pretty stupid to understand. You mean I don't have to spend 12,000, now I spend 3,000 or 3,500 and I get the same health care. You have to be pretty fucking
Better
dumb not
health
to get
care.
those numbers. Yeah. Better health care.
Yeah, but part of the problem when I talk about the messaging, one of the things I hear from Republicans, and this isn't even MAGA, just Republicans in general, or people who don't like the idea of universal health care. Well, I don't want the government making health decisions. They're convinced that if we go to universal health care, that the government would have some sort of say in the decisions in you're okay with a private company having a say over your health decisions, and that's fine, but not the government. No, government wouldn't have the decisions. They would just be facilitating the payment. Could you imagine being able to go to any doctor you want anywhere, not having to deal with in-network, out-of-network bullshit? Maybe you don't even need prior authorization for drugs. Okay, I I've mentioned this I think before. I was dating a woman several years ago. She had a child who was on a med, had been on it for several years, and needed this particular medication. And about every 3 to 6 months, the insurance would come out and say, "We can't fill that. We have to get prior authorization." And then you have to call the doctor's office. They'd have to send the form in explaining why they haven't, have you tried these 5 other meds first? Why do you need that med specifically? And it was a process. And on this medication in particular, because it was considered a controlled substance, she could only fill the prescription 2 days early
Yeah.
because you can't go too far early or they say you're abusing your prescription, even if you have, reasons or whatever. So even if she goes 2 days early to go get this filled, now she's got to deal with this prior authorization bullshit. That might take 4 or 5 days. In the meantime, he's got to go 2 or 3 days without the med. And they fought it every 3 to 6 months. The insurance would come back and try to do the same thing, wanting to deny the medication. We go to universal health care. You go to the doctor. Doctor says you need this med. You just go to the pharmacy. You get it. End of discussion. There's no. If they do it right, you wouldn't have any of the bullshit.
No, you wouldn't. I mean, I'm on Medicare right now. I paid for health insurance all my life, but I'm on Medicare. And the way it works is um, Section A, that is hospitalization and everything. I don't pay anything for that. The clinical and medical care stuff is Part B. I pay about 175, maybe 180 bucks for that. So when I go to the clinic, I do that. Now, I have a third account that is for pharmaceuticals, which is from an insurance company. You spend about 30 bucks a month for that, 30 to 40 bucks a month for the pharmaceutical. There's one other thing you can get, Part G, which basically fills in the spots that regular Medicare doesn't cover, meaning like copays, you're on 80/20 when you're on regular Medicare. This would fill that up too. So if you look at it, we're looking at roughly 350 bucks a month for me to be on Medicare if I have everything. I don't have everything. I don't have Part G because I don't go to the doctor that much, but 350 for everything. Now I know that's cheaper than most situations, and I really have no restrictions. If I'm in Georgia, if I'm wherever, and I have to go to the doctor, I got Medicare. It's so much easier. It's not free, but it's cheaper than having insurance companies in the middle of it and the pharmacists, pharmaceuticals, and all this stuff tacking on money. We got too many middlemen in healthcare. That's the problem. And Medicare for All would get rid of those middlemen. Oh, sure, they're going to be out of jobs and stuff, but we got motherfuckers out of a job right now. I don't give a shit about them being out of a job. We'll figure it out. We'll adjust it. But we need to get people the health care they need and make it a price that they can afford.
Yeah, you're right. And beyond that, if you do it right, you could also tack on vision and dental as
Yeah.
part of doing it. You just, granted, every place I've worked has offered vision insurance and dental insurance and all of that. And I've always taken it because, you need it. It's decent. But there's a lot of people who don't have access to those type of policies, and they're paying hundreds or thousands of dollars a year in vision or dental.
Yeah.
And again, why? When we can solve the problem, like you said, you have none of the bullshit. We could fix all of it. The problem becomes we get the messaging. And as far as the middlemen and like the insurance companies and all those people being out of a job, a vast number of them may not actually be out of jobs because you're going to need people. You could just incorporate a lot of these insurance companies. Maybe you buy out their facilities. It would be a big investment at once, but you buy out their facilities and their call centers and all of it. And now instead of handling Blue Cross Blue Shield or Hartford or whichever insurance company, United Health or whichever one it is, right? Now all they do is they handle the processing for Medicare.
Right.
For, you would still need a bunch of people that would have jobs, but it wouldn't be all making a third company, a private company, a shit ton of money. It would just be handling, making sure the doctor at your local office got the bill paid when you went to the doctor. And we could figure out, do we want to have it be just a straight 100% cover and you pay nothing? Or is it like what you already have with Medicare and you got to pay a little bit every year? We could figure the happy balance there, but
Yeah.
there's going to be an appetite for it come 2028. And I think by 2032, if the Democrats want to win in 32, it had better be passed, and it hopefully passed early and working.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'm going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. Eric, thanks for coming in. I always enjoy a conversation. I always learn some things. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. I had nothing else really going on tonight, so figure it was a good time to be on the podcast and share what I know with everybody.
Absolutely. Now tell people where they can find you, where they can find your podcast, because you do one too.
Well, you can find me over on TikTok and YouTube at Analytical Iowan. Also on Blue Sky at Analytical Iowan at Blue Sky. And you can find the audio for all of my TikToks and the podcast on Spotify. I believe it is also up on Amazon and Apple and maybe a few others at Analytical Iowan over there. When it comes to the Analytical Iowan podcast, video is up on YouTube, audio up on Spotify. And if I have it set up right, like I think I do, I think you can still get the audio by itself also available on YouTube.
And next time we talked, uh, um, Eric and I talked about this, and we thought, what the fuck, we'll do it. We're a couple of lazy old white guys. What we're going to try to do is we're going to do a podcast like we just did here, except it will be a combination podcast. It will be Eric's Analytical Iowan podcast and the Rational Boomer podcast. So I'll record it and he'll record it. So then you'll be able to get it at a bunch of different places or
Yep.
doubles. I don't know what advantage it does for us to do that, but fucking easy. Let's do it.
Well, the advantage to doing it that way, I think, is just then we only have one podcast to record. And there are, I think, some people that listen to my show that don't listen to yours. There's a bunch of
Exactly.
people that listen to your show right now that don't listen to mine. So why not?
Yeah, we'll give it a try. Next time we do it, maybe next week, some point, we'll do a double podcast. It'll be both our podcasts. That'll be interesting to do. Um, maybe we incorporate somebody else in it too, so that we can bounce off three people or something. I don't know. We'll talk about it.
Yeah,
Anyway, for
might be a
those
good
of you
idea.
listening, yeah. For those of you listening, I want to thank you for taking the time to do it. I hope you have a great day, and we will talk to you again tomorrow.